RegO has prepared this training module to inform the professional installer or system designer on certain containers or applications where our products are utilized. For the more technical problems and theories, there are many texts and manuals concerning the subject that should be consulted. The information supplied in this module is not intended to conflict with federal, state, or local ordinances and regulations. These should be observed at all times.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of RegO Products, we would like to welcome and thank you for joining us today on our first of a three-part training series in May. First, we would like to introduce you all to our regional business development managers who are in the field to assist not only our distributors, but you, the marketers, as well. In the West, we have Ed Varney. Midwest, we have Paul Baldock. Northeast, Sean Carr, and Southeast, myself, Jay Sells. Your presenters today will be Cody Reeves, our technical service specialist, and Paul Baldock, Midwest BDM. Now I'd like to hand it over to Cody and let's get started. Cody?
Good morning, everybody. We also want to thank our distributors for getting you guys on today. We are going to continue to have trainings, and we would like to get your guys' input too of what you'd like to see in the future as well. What other trainings you would want? But we really want to thank our distributors for having you guys on and get you guys on today. And then today, for references, what are we going to reference? So the information that we have gathered today is going to be referenced from NFPA 58 2020. UL 144, then also too, a lot of this information is in our L545 serviceman's manual. So if those of you guys are out there in the field, make sure you have that serviceman's manual. It has a lot of information and a lot of nice tools for you guys to use. Then additionally, thanks to our Canadian and Latin American customers. A couple of these things that we were referencing, if it is invalid for you, please send me an email or send me a note. Say, hey, I know you guys don't use plastic PVC for vent pipe. Send me an email and we can do something in the future for you guys to accommodate. We have talked to our Canadian distributors and Latin American distributors, and if you guys would like more detailed training, we could absolutely get that accommodated for you guys. Then kicking off, we're going to talk just really quick. What are some interesting RegO facts? So for you guys that didn't know, what does RegO stand for? RegO stands for Regulator Oxygen. And that actually ties into the question we have on the bottom. Did RegO originally start in the LP gas industry? No, we didn't. RegO started in the gas welding industry and manufactured soda fountains. So we were using oxygen for our regulators back in 1908 when we first started. So the Regulator Oxygen is actually where RegO came from, and it was a name that just kind of stuck. Then where else is RegO where is RegO's main headquarters? Our main headquarters is in Elon, North Carolina, and we also have 4 locations in North Carolina. We invite you guys after this slowdown to come and visit us if you're ever in North Carolina. After this coronavirus and COVID-19 is over with and we're kind of out of quarantine, you're more than welcome to come and visit one of our locations if you're nearby. And then kicking it off, we're going to talk about the LV4403 series regulator features. So we're going to talk about some of the features of this regulator specifically. So our main feature, as you guys can tell over the years, we have improved our regulators, our valves, and we will continue to improve. But latest in 2017, we did the laser engraving information on this bonnet. The reason why we did this laser engraving information is because for those of you guys that are in service and that are out in the field, you can easily read this. If you're going ahead, you're doing a gas check, leak check, you're doing a safety check, you can go ahead and physically read this regulator out in the field. We also give you an ID code so you can identify it too as well for future purposes. But you can physically see this 20 years down the road. It's not like a sticker. It's not going to fade away. This laser engraved information will always be on this. Then additionally, bonnet caps require only hand tightening to ensure a tight seal without the use of wrenches. So we get a lot of questions, and why don't we have wrench flats on top of this? Unless you tighten this cap down and Loctite it with a pipe wrench, 95% of that time you can take that cap off by hand. Then additionally, bonnet and bonnet are secured for proper seals using torque screws. So all the regulators, we use as many fasteners as possible to tighten and secure that body together, just so you don't have any issues later on in the future with any kind of leaks on that body and bonnet connection. And then bonnet and body locator tabs for alignment and secure fit. This is for us in the factory. So when we go ahead and install these regulators, we want to make sure these regulators are going to be properly aligned every single time we put them together. So that's why we have the bonnet and body locator tabs. That is for us for assembly, and that's so you guys know we're going to always install it in the same position every time. Then epoxy paint. So what do we use for paint? How do we coat it? We coat all our regulators with epoxy paint. Epoxy paint is very high in durability and is both chemical and temperature resistant. You've probably really never seen a RegO regulator fade, but that epoxy paint is very high in durability and it has many other functions. Then Service Tech wrench flats for use with a 12-inch adjustable wrench. So what do we mean by that? You go to Home Depot, Lowe's, you get a adjustable wrench from your distributor. It's a standard adjustable wrench. That standard adjustable wrench will always fit our wrench flats. You don't have to have a pipe wrench to go ahead and connect to our wrench flats of our regulator. This is the advantage of a RegO regulator. You will always be able to go ahead and take your standard 12-inch adjustable wrench to that regulator. Then where else is epoxy paint used? So hints, travels in the ocean. So for you guys, where else it is used? Think about Navy ships. Ships in general out in the ocean. You see some of those sailors going ahead and painting up the seamen out there painting their boats. They're going to be putting epoxy paint and coating onto that. So if it's good enough for a naval ship, it's good enough for our regulators. Then vent assembly has a flathead screwdriver slot for easy removal. So you guys can see in 2017, this was new to our regulator. We had some complaints that, hey, it was kind of a little bit of a pain to take out that vent screen assembly. So we did give you the hole there so you can easily remove it. You guys just saw that video. It is very easy to remove and access that vent screen, then also to get to that vent suppressor. Then some of the features of our diaphragm. So we have a molded diaphragm with a locking bead. So what does that mean? There's a locking bead in that diaphragm that holds that assembly in place. So if you have an issue where that regulator's moving, it may be venting just because you have some creeping, that diaphragm's not going to pull out of place. It's going to stay in place because it's going to be locked in place. Our diaphragm plate, so our diaphragm plate here is curved and out of the way of that diaphragm just so you don't have any nicks or anything like that getting onto that diaphragm. Then also we were the first manufacturer to use this bead as well. So this bead, we were the first to use that on our regulators. The diaphragms are designed to prevent any damage. So what does that mean? Again, the diaphragm plate is going to it's going to be out of the way of that diaphragm, so you're not going to have any issues with that. And we use a tough, flexible fabric that gives a super sensitive response in temperature ranges of -40 to +165. So we use a nitrile material. That material is very flexible. So if you guys have an area where it's super sensitive range, or the nitrile material is able to carry that out in the sensitive range very thoroughly. Then RegO plated lever arm assembly has never failed millions of regulators in use. So our design, we do feel, is a superior design. It is a great design. This is our lever arm assembly, then also too with our seat disc assembly. So this has never failed. One of the things that you can notice about our regulators is that no matter how where this alignment is, this will always be in place. This is always going to be the same seating surface on the inlet nozzle and seat disc. Then mounting screws. So mounting screws are enclosed in the box. We don't assemble the mounting screws into the regulators just because if you're going to mount that regulator, you're going to take those screws out anyways. Then replaceable brass inlet nozzles. So for those of you guys that need to remove your inlet nozzle and you got to go ahead and check that seat disc, you can go ahead and remove that brass inlet nozzle and you can access that seat disc. Or if they have damage to that brass inlet nozzle, somebody accidentally screwed a flare fitting into there by accident or had some issues with it, you can go ahead and actually replace that inlet nozzle. We do sell them. They are available. And then RegO regulators meet UL requirements. So UL requirements and double failure. So UL actually requires us to do a test. It's called the UL 144, and it's for overpressurized protection. We can't put any more than 2 psi through a building through a second stage if it fails. And with that vent and everything in our assembly, we meet that requirement. Now, what does it mean for double failure? So if we have a first stage that fails and a second stage fails, we are still going to be below that 2 psi range for overpressurized protection. So what we did, we went an additional measure to make sure that we wouldn't put any more than 2 psi into the building, just in case there is a failure. Then easy to use adjustment screws. So this went through our regular refresh as well. What we did is we gave you some advantages here, so you can see you got your plus and minus. So you can see if you're whether increasing or decreasing. Then additionally, we gave you the sum screws, so you can go ahead and turn this in and out by hand. You don't have to have a large screwdriver or Allen key. You can actually adjust these regulators by hand now. Then regulator data labels. So these data labels are for you guys. Gas check, leak check, same thing. Any kind of paperwork that you guys have, you're putting a new regulator in, we want you guys to have the information just so you don't have to write it down. Your offices can read it. You're going to have that information. You'll have 2 data labels. Then repairable, replaceable seat discs, seats that can be easily accessed by service personnel. So you guys go ahead and remove your inlet nozzle. You can go ahead and access the seat disc. You can clean it or you can replace it. And now to you, Paul.
Hey, great job, Cody. Thanks. Let's talk about what components of the RegO regulators are serviceable. The seat disc, vent screen or suppressor, inlet nozzle, and bonnet cap are all field replaceable without voiding any of our UL listings. Our competitor regulators do not contain any serviceable components. Not only are we 100% made and tested, each of our units are tested in the United States, we carry a full 10-year warranty. That is not a prorated warranty. That's a full 10-year warranty. Silver service life. That's back to you, Cody.
25-year service life. Yep, so guys, you will have a 25-year service life. So for recommendations for regulators out in the field, how long should you have them? We are recommending 25 years. It's going to be a 25-year service life, and we will have a 10-year full warranty on our regulators. And Paul, this is one's to you.
Yes, whenever replacing a regulator, always use a new pigtail or hogtail. Replace your regulators with a new pigtail. This helps keep the seat disc clean. Older pigtails can have material flake off and become jammed in the regulator inlet. The use of POL fittings should always be the preferred method to eliminate the potential of pipe sealant traveling to the seat disc. This can cause the regulator to creep, resulting in higher outlet pressure, higher lockup pressure. It may also cause the internal relief valve to open. Cody?
All right. So guys, I have a large vapor load that even in the summertime causes the first stage regulator frost over. Can anybody tell me what is occurring on this regulator? So what is happening with this regulator? Pressure drops, cools, the LP gas vapor, liquid droplets are going to form. Then liquid droplets enter the regulator where they are vaporized and causing frost to form. So what is wrong with this regulator? Where should this regulator be installed? So what are we having? What was the issue with it? So you have that large vapor load. This regulator should be installed higher the container connection. So reason being is install that regular higher the container connection. It will give that the liquid droplets the ability to fall back into that container. So if, as you guys know, anything over 15 psi, you have the chance for condensation back to liquid. So with that chances, you want to go ahead and make sure you're going ahead and giving that liquid a chance and a path to get back into that container. Then additionally too, You're connecting that right to a pigtail to that container connection. It's called a pigtail for a reason. So go ahead and loop your pigtails, put a big loop in that, starting from the bottom. That creates a trap in there, and it gives that liquid a flow, an area to go ahead and travel back into that container connection. And then for 15N8597 series. So over the years, we've heard a lot of people that didn't realize that this regulator didn't have an internal relief valve. So the 1580 series and the 597 series, these adjustable regulators, they need an external relief valve. They don't have a relief valve built into it. So for those of you guys in the field, if you're going ahead and installing these relief valves, additionally, don't install these relief valves into the ports on the side of this regulator. What you have on these ports on the side of these regulators, you're going to have a reduced orifice. So these are specifically for pressure gauges, or reduced orifices are going to give you a number 54 orifice for a pressure gauge, just so you can put the pressure gauge in the field. So make sure when you're going ahead and installing these regulators, 1580s and 597 series, you're always installing these relief valves downstream. Then second stage and 2 PSI regulators, vents must be pointed downwards and should be installed 12 to 18 inches above the ground, unless it's going to be under a tank lid or under some type of cover. So in snow applications, this may exceed 6 feet to exceed snow accumulation. So make sure when you're going ahead, depending on your snow level, you want to make sure that regulator vent is above that connection. So you don't want any kind of blockage to that regulator vent. Then additionally, you guys can see here too as well, see how this regulator in this container has a slight pitch to it. Whenever possible, do try to give that regulator a bit of a slight pitch. What it is doing, it does have a hole in that bonnet to allow for drainage and condensation to come out. So you're just giving it a better path for that regulator to for that condensation to drain. And Paul?
Hey, thanks, Cody. Hey, UL 144 specs say that a regulator shall be constructed to provide drainage of all condensate from the entire regulator bonnet cavity when the vent is directed vertically down. The hole in the bottom allows moisture to drain out from the bonnet to prevent moisture from freezing. Very important. Cody?
Thank you, Paul. Then for you guys, would this regulator be installed properly? What do you think? Would this vent be placed properly? As you can see here, that is going to be a no. There's a couple questions too on this regulator. How did they install it? What they're using it for? What was the purpose? As you can see, but for installation practice here, if they're using this as a second stage regulator, you want to make sure that vent is pointing downwards. Also too, I'm sure you guys, if you guys go out in the field and you're going ahead and you have to adjust this regulator, you're not going to be happy about trying to get to that bonnet cap and removing it to adjust the pressure. So installation practice, you should always try to make it as easily serviceable for you as possible. Then some of the other kind of questions on this regulator is this ball valve here. Would you install that before that regulator? Also, there's no unions if you ever need to replace that regulator in the future. Then additionally, what is going on? Is this a building? Is this a house? Are they running 10 PSI through this house to this regulator? And is this a generator on this side? So there's a bunch of questions about this installation. And also too, if they're not using that as a 10 PSI and they're using that as a 2 PSI system, you can't use RegO regulators as a 2 PSI regulator. They won't take a 2 PSI inlet pressure. Their regulators are designed for 5 to 15 PSI inlet pressure. Then also too, would this regulator be acceptable? What are some of the issues with this? As you can see, it's very obvious. It's water. Any kind of water getting into that regulator can really do some severe damage to the intercomponents of that regulator. So I want to make sure they replace that regulator. Also too, for this installation, they install that regulator down to the bottom. They've got this big tank lid and this extension on this lid. Next time, try to get that regulator up as high as possible. Then another issue too, they're going to have to fix that drainage. In an emergency situation, they can't shut down this tank. So again, general recommendations, if you do experience a regulator that has experienced water, please replace it. Replace that regulator. There is some issues that could happen with that and do some internal damage to some internal components. That's going to be to the diaphragm, the seat disc, and the lever assembly. We do get a few regulators back every year that does have that that damage done to it because of flood waters. So again, what should you do to fix that? So make sure you have the proper drainage of that tank. And that tank, if it is experiencing water, you're going to want to make sure you have that regulator up as high as possible. Then also too, go ahead and make sure your bonnet caps are tight so no water can get into that regulator to that bonnet cap, and vent that regulator all the way up to that top of that container connection, that tank lid. So go ahead and do a snorkel tube and get that regulator up as high as possible, that vent, so no water can get into that regulator. Then this is some of the damage you can see. So as you guys can see on our diaphragm, our springs, diaphragm plate, you're going to have some heavy corrosion that could occur. So make sure you guys are replacing those. If you do come across regulators underwater, replace them, please. So for you guys, how far does a regulator need to be vented away from an air conditioner? So for NFPA 58, that is going to be 5 feet horizontally. Specifically right there horizontally. So remember that it's not going to be vertically, it has to be horizontally. Same thing, how far does a regulator need to be vented away from a door? That is going to be 3 feet horizontally. Then also too, not to be confused with ASME and DOT containers. I know it's commonly confused. We get a lot of 10 feet and 5 feet on this question. Then as well too, it's all on your authority having jurisdiction. So depending on what state you're on, what location, some states can supersede it and have their own code. So make sure you're going ahead and you're talking to your local town inspectors, your state inspectors, your Department of Agriculture's. Make sure you're seeing what they want for these instances. You want to make sure you're abide with what they have. Then again, regulator installation tips: 5 foot minimum from leaf discharge to any source of ignition or mechanical air intake. So if you have a furnace intake, you got to be 5 feet away. If you have an electrical outlet, you have to be 5 feet away. Air conditioner, generator, a pool heater, all your equipment is considered an ignition source. Then same thing, 3 foot minimum from release discharge to any building opening. So you got your Belco door, you got your door, you got your window. You might have an attic ventilation. Also, I'm not an attic ventilation, but you could have a ventilation for your basement. So make sure it is away. Then also too, building openings is also considered below the level of discharge. So if you do have a regulator and the window is right above, you don't have to vent that away. But if this window is below this level of discharge, that means you have to vent that regulator away. Then second stage regulators, a regulator vent must be piped away to the outdoors per 58. The use of metal pipe, metal tubing, PVC meeting the requirements of UL 651, or flexible pipe meeting the requirements of UL 1660. So what does UL 651 and UL 1660 mean? What that means that if you're using PVC piping, it does have to be UV resistant. So regular PVC, Schedule 80 PVC, NC PVC are not cannot be of use. We do sell the Carflex material. Carflex is UV resistant. And then also too, if you guys go to your distributors or your electrical supply houses, the electrical conduit they use is actually UV resistant as well. So those are the materials you want to use, or use metal piping or tubing. For those in Canada, PVC is actually not allowed. So in Canada, make sure you're not using PVC piping. Then the vent diameter must be equal or greater to than the diaphragm, than the diameter of that regular outlet. So you have an LV4403 series regulator, and it has that 3/4 inch outlet. You want to make sure you maintain that 3/4 inch outlet on this pipe away. Then additionally too, so when you go ahead and remove our vent screen out of this to vent this regulator away, make sure you're putting your regular vent assembly at the end of the pipe away. You're going to make sure you put that vent assembly on the end of that pipe away, especially for a new regulator, because it has that suppressor material inside of it to control that air movement in and out of that regulator. And again, this is just to show you guys an installation. So first off, can PVC be used? No. So it's got to be either electrical conduit or that rigid piping or metal tubing. And then additionally, what's wrong with this installation here? So as you can see, it looks like they're venting straight up vertically. So that wouldn't be proper. They need them to go ahead and make sure they're venting this away horizontally. Then even too, if you're venting this a regular way, that vent has to always be pointing downwards. So you always want to point that vent downwards. Even if you have to go up with that regulator vent, it still needs to be pointed downwards. Then would a 3/4 inch street 90 be acceptable for when piping away a regulator? So who would think, would that be acceptable? That is going to be a no. The reason being, you guys can see the diameter of this 3/4 inch street 90. It's going to have a reduced orifice in this size. So just because of the casting on the street 90s and the heavy wall thickness, it's going to reduce that down to around 1/2 inch pipe. So make sure when you're venting away a regulator, you're not using 3/4 inch street 90s or any kind of street 90s. Then would 3/4 inch PVC be acceptable? So we talked about that prior. Is regular PVC acceptable that you use for your water lines, drain pipes, and etc.? Would that be acceptable? No. PVC, CPVC, Schedule 80 PVC is not going to be acceptable. So what are some of your options? We already told you your options were, metal piping and tubing. What does RegO have to provide you guys with for your venting away? So when I did service, I carried a few of these on my truck. I went ahead and did a safety check. That regulator needed to be vented away immediately. I had a 10-foot LV960 kit to go ahead and vent this regulator away. Then additionally too, so if you do not want all these components, let's say you go ahead and you have an LV960 kit, you use 10 feet of that, you use 4 feet of that 6 feet kit, and you still want to keep that 6 feet tubing, you can go ahead and get new end connectors from our distributor. So if you guys want new end connectors, just because you didn't use the whole amount of that kit doesn't mean that it's going to be a waste and it's got to be scrapped. You can go ahead and get the end connectors as well and make another new kit additionally. Then also too, this 90-degree elbow is available. So if you want this 90-degree elbow too as well, I tell everybody that's out in the field, if you ever had any issue with putting a vent screen at the end of a black 90 or a black elbow, or trying to make it up with another fitting, sometimes it can not fit in there as well, depending on the casting of those materials. So this vent elbow, you can put our regular vent screen all the way into it. You can shake it around. You can move it around. It will not fall out of place. That is an LV960-8R1. But you guys can go ahead and get these elbows separately. So if you don't want to go ahead and use this flexible vent material, you can go ahead and use either black iron pipe, metallic piping, or electrical conduit to vent away that regulator. Then those of you guys that have seen this in the past, you might have seen some 1/2 inch copper coming out of this vent outlet. And you're going to see this suppressor material. So these are old suppressor materials for oxygen regulators. We have seen a lot of them in the past being used. They are not recommended. So we talked about the outlet of this regulator has to be a minimum of 3/4 inch, because it is 3/4 inch on the outlet. That is going to cause that vent diameter to be too small. So that vent diameter using these connections is going to be smaller than that vent outlet. So remember, you always need a 3/4 inch pipe size minimum for the LV4403 series regulators and LV5503 series. Additionally, too, if you guys are using compact regulators, you're using our LV3403B series, that is going to be a 3/8 outlet. So make sure you're going ahead and venting that away with 3/8. Then our single stage regulator. So say you have a new single stage regulator, can you go ahead and install this single stage regulator out in the field in a fixed pipe system? Fixed pipe systems since 1995 of NFPA 58, they're not allowed, they're not acceptable. You guys will notice this. How can you tell if you have a single stage regulator? Well, this single stage regulator is going to take tank pressure and knock it down to 11 inches. Single stage, so that's going to be in one stage. What to replace that now? We have twin stage regulators. So what you will see is you will only see one stage. If you guys have an LV404, B34, or B39, you will see two stages on that regulator. So if you ever come across a regulator that's brown or this fawn color inside of a tank lid, make sure you're replacing it. That is going to be a single stage regulator. And again, too, you guys will see some of these regulators on our barbecue cylinders. It is acceptable on small BTU load applications for barbecue cylinders and that kind of applications. But anything on fixed pipe systems, you're not going to want to use. So the series that we had was an LV2302 series. We were replacing that with an LV404B series. Then too, again, we do still have a 302 series. This is going to be for small applications. It's not going to be for fixed pipe systems. Paul.
Let's talk about why regulators would be changed from the factory settings. It is okay to change the factory setting on your system, for example, with a new high efficiency furnace or appliance. Never change that factory setting to make up for a small gas line. Also, never change that setting to make up for a low capacity regulator. Remember, readjusting a regulator affects not only the delivery pressure, but also the lockup pressure. Be sure the system and appliances will operate properly before making major changes to the regulator delivery pressure adjustment. What is creeping and what causes it? Creeping is usually caused by foreign material on the seat disc that typically comes from the system inlet piping. The material prevents the seat disc from properly seating against the inlet nipple. The regulator cannot fully lock up. Pressure continues to build downstream to a point where the relief valve may open and vent gas to the atmosphere. When a properly installed RegO regulator does not lock up or is creeping, what should you do? Simply remove the inlet nozzle and wipe the seat disc off with a clean, dry cloth. Reinstall the inlet nozzle and check for leaks and lockup. Cody?
Thank you, Paul. So those of you guys, we get a lot of questions of asking of, well, yes, this is an advantage of RegO regulators, but where is it? Do we have any information on it? It is. So if you guys have your service man's manuals, it's actually in our service man's manuals. So go ahead, you can go ahead and check in your service man's manuals, but we do have an instruction on how to remove this, how to remove it, clean it, check it. So make sure you guys are using that service man's manual. So it's going to be a 3-step process. We're going to actually walk you through it. Just to explain to you guys again. So where's the inlet nozzle? You guys are going to remove the inlet nozzle. This is going to be the inlet nozzle of the regulator. And then where's the seat disc? So seat disc is going to be down below. So one of the things that we want to mention and make sure you guys know is that even though you remove the inlet nozzle and you clean the seat disc, you're missing a step. So make sure when you remove your inlet nozzle, you actually check the inlet nozzle as well and make sure that is clean. Make sure there's no scoring on that. So go ahead, when you remove that, make sure you're checking that inlet nozzle. So this is going to be the point where this regulator opens and closes. So we're going to go over these steps. So hold the neck of the regulator body securely with a wrench. So make sure you're using 2 wrenches. And then remove that inlet nozzle with a second wrench by turning clockwise. So that is going to be left-hand threads. So we get a lot of questions every year on this too as well, is why do we have left-hand threads on this inlet nozzle? This is the reason why. So when you go ahead and install a RegO regulator, make sure you are using 2 adjustable wrenches. You are backing the regulators up right, and you're not loosening that inlet nozzle. If you have an installation where you installed a new regulator and you did notice that, hey, that regulator is creeping, check to make sure that inlet nozzle is tight. Now also too, if it is a new regulator, go ahead and check to make sure, check that inlet nozzle as well. We got a lot of regulators that come back where we do get the regulators back and they didn't check the inlet nozzle. When you're going ahead and you're doing polyethylene pipe, you're going ahead and chamfering that line, there is a chance you might drop a piece of polyethylene pipe into that line. It can get in and sit on that regulator seat disc. Also too, copper. If you're not cleaning your copper right away, there's a chance you could have some copper flakes. Then also too with your pigtails. So make sure, even if you do have a new regulator, check that. Make sure no dirt or debris got into that piping and got onto that seat disc. Then inspect the regulator seat disc. So here I was able to pull the regulator out and I could actually physically see the seat disc, so I didn't remove that seat disc. But if you do need to remove that seat disc, you can use a 1/2-inch nut driver to clean it, or you can replace it. So you can go ahead and get replaceable seat discs. So you can go ahead and remove that nut, replace that seat disc. Then also too, like I said before, inspect that regulator inlet nozzle. So although that seat may be fine, but if you have any scoring or any kind of damage to that inlet nozzle, that can cause that regulator to not seat and close. So make sure you're checking both. You want to check your seat disc and you want to check your inlet nozzle. Then go ahead and you're going to reinstall that inlet nipple. So reinstall your inlet nipple. Make sure you still have that gasket in place. You want to make sure you have that gasket in place. Then tighten that inlet nozzle. You're going to use 2 wrenches to around 35 foot-pounds torque. Do not over tighten it. This does not have to be cranked. It doesn't have to be excessively tight. Make sure you guys are tightening to around 35 foot-pounds torque. Then what happens when you complete these steps? So after completing these 3 steps, so you went ahead and you removed your inlet nozzle, you go ahead and you inspected your inlet nozzle and seat disc, you replace that seat disc if it needed to be, then you're going to reinstall it and put them back in service. As well too is when you go ahead and install that back in service and you go ahead and putting that back together, we've talked about debris and pigtails. Go ahead and check your pigtails. Make sure there's no kind of sediment in that pigtail. Make sure you blow out your piping. Make sure you have nothing in that piping before you go ahead and put this insulation all back together, because that could be the issue. You may want to go ahead and just replace your pigtail just so you don't have that issue. Then also too, make sure you're doing your leak check. So go ahead and disconnect the line from service. You want to make sure you're going ahead and doing a pressure leak check, and you're putting that line back in service and you're doing your safety check. Paul.
Here is a photo of what debris can look like on a seat disc, causing the regulator to creep and vent gas. It appears to me that there could be some sand, copper flakes, possibly some pipe dope. All these issues cause high lockup. Cody?
Thank you, Paul. And you guys can see there is some debris on this seat disc. You want to make sure when you go ahead and using these regulators, you go ahead and replace those pigtails. So don't use an old pigtail. Make sure you're putting new pigtails into that insulation. Then also too, leak checks additionally. So when you guys are doing leak checks, if you have a tap, a gauge port and a tap, Presto tap, try to use Presto tap gauges. The reason why that is that when you go ahead and using the Presto tap, you're not moving around your pigtail. So if you're doing a leak check, use a Presto tap gauge. If you're going ahead and using the blocks, the only issue with using those block gauges that you have the chance of moving around that pigtail, moving around some debris, and you're going to get that debris into that regulator. Then, as you guys can see on this regulator, what's wrong with this regulator? Is this venting undersized? So we talked about minimum piping. What should that vent outlet be for that vent? It's going to be 3/4. So what we have here is we have 1/2-inch copper going out. So that would be no, they used the wrong material. Not that they didn't use they used the wrong material, but they undersized it. That needs to be a 3/4 inch minimum. Then also too, kind of take pride in your work too as well. You can see there's a little bit of excess pipe sealant, so you want to make sure you're not using excess pipe sealant. They really heavily coated that one in. and your piping. So you got piping that's going to be outside. Make sure you put some coating of spray paint on that. You don't want it rusting out within a year or two in service of this installation. Then performance curves. So even though a regular, an LV4403B series says it's good for 935,000 BTUs, does that mean every regulator is going to be good for 935,000 BTUs? No, it does not. It depends on your installation, what your pressure drop is, what your inlet pressure is going to be of that tank, and then what are the temperatures you're experiencing. So if you're always experiencing warm temperatures, yes, you could probably get away with using the LV4403 series more than if you're in the Northeast or you're in Canada, you're in the North, where you're experiencing cold temperatures. The reason being that is going to be on your inlet pressures. So you think about in the summertime, you have 150 psi pressure. You get down into the wintertime, you're experiencing much below 0 degrees. You're going to be experiencing 35 psi pressures, if not lower. So 20 degrees, I believe you're going to be experiencing around 12 psi. So you want to make sure that that regulator is going to work for your temperature and what you're going to experience. And then where are these curves? So if anybody wants an L500, they are in our L500 catalogs. Please reach out to our distributors. We can send them out to you. But these performance curves are all going to be on every regulator. It's also on our website too. If you go to the literature section on our website, but every regulator will have a performance curve. And what are these performance going to look like? So as you guys can see here, we have an LV4403TR, so you have your first stage regulator installed. Then you have your LV4403B series. This is what's going to look at. We're showing you here the initial setting. What is the initial setting? So when you get a first stage regulator right out of the box from RegO, is that going to be sitting at exactly at 10 psi for that TR? No, it's not. What we do is we actually rate it at 500,000 BTUs with a 50 psi inlet, and we adjust that to 10 psi. So that regulator will be at 500,000 BTUs with a 50 psi inlet pressure at 10 psi. So if you get that regulator and you install it new on box, you ever wonder why it's not always at 10 psi? It's not going to be because of that lockup. It's going to lock up, and it's going to lock up to around 10.5, depending on your temperature differences. Then also too, same thing with your second stage regulator. So an LV4403B series, what do we set it at? We set it at 10 psi. So our initial setting is 10 psi inlet, and it's going to be 75,000 BTUs at 11 inches water column. So again, that regular right out of the box is not going to be sitting right at 11 inches. Depending on your temperature and your inlet pressure, it's going to vary of what your lockup's going to be. And then, so what do these curves tell you? So what does it tell you? When the inlet pressure goes up, delivery pressure goes up. So you can see here 150 psi inlet pressure. So you have a nice warm day, your delivery pressure is going to maintain on this 10 psi. Also too, if you're having a cold day, so if you're having a 15 psi inlet pressure, you're going to see when the inlet pressure goes down, the delivery pressure will go down as well. So 15 psi inlet pressure, you're going to see your BTUs and delivery pressure and curve drop right on down. Same thing. Additionally, too, as here, this is going to depend on what you're using it. If you're experiencing cold temperatures and you're using an 8 psi inlet pressure, or you're experiencing much below 30 degrees Fahrenheit and using 5 psi inlet pressure, you're going to want to go ahead and use a 5 psi inlet pressure. So what that will tell you if you're adjusting your range of your first stage regulator. So if you're going ahead and adjusting this down at 8 psi, you want to go ahead and you're going to make sure that your delivery pressure and curve is going to match to what it is. Same thing if you're going ahead and using the 5 psi inlet pressure, you can go ahead and adjust that down. Then we talked earlier about inlet pressures. So why can't we use it as a 2 psi regulator? It's because of adjustment ranges. So if you're going ahead and putting a 597 series regulator to this regulator, or a 1580 series with a 15 psi inlet, this will give you more BTUs in demand out of that regulator. So it will take a 5 to 15 psi inlet pressure for this second stage regulators. Then also too, follow CTEP guidelines for lockup and flow. Make sure when you're doing a lockup and flow test that all appliances are running. So go ahead, fire up all your appliances, make sure they're all running. You want to make sure all of them are drawing on the demand. Then always check the appliance from the always check the appliance pressure from the furthest appliance away. So you've got a unit, and your unit is the furnace, and that is the farthest away. Fire up all your units, and then check your flow and pressure at the unit. You want to make sure it's going to be at the farthest appliance away at the end. You want to make sure that is going to get the proper delivery pressure. Then for delivery pressure, what range you need to be in. So per UL 1-44, lockup should not exceed 120% from that delivery pressure for a second stage regulator. So when you're going ahead and checking this, your delivery pressure is 10 inches and you're locking up at 12 inches water column, you're going to be close to that range. You want to make sure you either you check your pipe sizing. You may want to check your regulator. Do you have a big enough regulator into that installation? So go ahead and make sure you're checking that. Then for first stage regulator is a little bit different for that lockup and from the delivery pressure. So that's going to be 130% from that delivery pressure to that lockup. Then how many feet should this be vented away? So you guys can see here, we have a pool heater right here. What are some of the issues that are wrong with this regulator? Well, you can see that's going to be 5 feet from this pool heater. This is going to be an ignition source. It is not vented away 5 feet. A couple funny things about this picture too. Is this supposed to be a AAA kit? If so, it's not doing any purpose. It's not going to be installed correctly. We talked about where the vent needs to be pointed. It is not pointed downwards. Now they did use electrical fittings here, but they used regular schedule 80-90. So they went ahead and used the wrong 90. And also too, I don't see a vent suppressor at the end of this pipeway. There's no elbow pointing that downwards. So there's no debris or anything getting trapped into that vent opening. Then too, additionally, you guys will see, you can see this copper going right through concrete. So what happens when you have copper gas lines going through concrete? Copper is going to corrode that copper. You want to make sure you go ahead and if they're putting any kind of gas line through concrete, you're going to want to coat that, either use your coated copper, use some piping to sleeve that going through that concrete. Then, so again, always keep the bonnet cap and vent screen in place. And if missing, replace that regulator. So if you ever get out to an installation, that bonnet cap is missing or your vent screen is missing, please replace that regulator. You want to check to make sure there's no internal damage to that regulator. What can happen is you can have some ants get into there, sit in there, get some insects onto that inside that regulator, and could do some damage. So if you do see any of that, please replace that regulator. You don't want any of that damage in there. Then too, also as well, those of you guys that are curious of what this hole is in this bonnet cap, why is that there? So if you do have an installation where somebody is always removing that cap, you got somebody out there that always wants to adjust their pressure and move it. Those of you guys that do meter service, you can go ahead and take that same wire that you use to tag your meter, go ahead and put that wire around this body of this regulator, and that will keep that bonnet cap from either allowing them to not remove it. And also too, if they go ahead and remove that, the bonnet cap will be right there, and you can see that they went ahead and tampered with that regulator. Then too, as well, so we talked about you can't go ahead and that regulator has to always be pointed downwards. Can you remove these screws and turn that vent? No, you can't. We don't recommend it as a practice. The reason being that is if you go ahead and remove all these screws, you go ahead, turn and adjust it and put them back into place, it is voiding our pressure test of that regulator. So it's going to void that UL listing, and it's going to void that pressure test of that regulator. We can't confirm once you go ahead and remove these screws and adjust it and turn it, that regulator is going to be leak-free, that it's going to have a leak-free operation, and it's going to be in the right adjustment ranges. We can't guarantee you that. But what are your options? So you can go ahead and order regulator in all different vent orientations. So we have an LV4403B4, and you want that vent at 9 o'clock here. So you want that vent at 9 o'clock. You can order an LV4403B4 V9. That'll be vent at 9 o'clock. Then also too, if you want to go ahead and order that regulator vent at 3 o'clock, right here, you can order an LV4403B4V3. Then if you want a vent over outlet, so you can order an LV4403B4VO. Then kind of another mention too as well. I did have somebody call me last week. I get a lot of calls from end users, service techs, and our LV5503B8 series. Not a lot of these guys, a lot of people know about our different vent orientations. So those are the guys that are doing regulator installations for generators, and you're going ahead and you don't want to go ahead and pipe that generator, put a second stage at that generator, and you're doing a first and second stage regulator at the tank. If you're going ahead and put a first stage regulator at your propane tank, then you're going to go ahead and run some polyethylene pipe underground to that unit. You're upsizing it for 11 inches water column. Our LV5503B8 does come with a vent over outlet position. So you can go ahead and put a vent over outlet, and that that vent position will be pointed downwards for that installation. Now on to you, Paul.
Great, thanks, Cody. Hey, regulator freeze-ups occur because there's an excessive moisture in the gas. All LP gas should be checked for moisture. Containers should be treated with the proper amount of methanol. In our Serviceman's Manual L545 on page 9, there's a section that talks about neutralizing moisture. Even if a careful inspection reveals no visible moisture, the container must still be neutralized, since dew may have formed on the walls. Additionally, the contained air may have a relative humidity of up to 100%. A rule of thumb for neutralizing moisture in an ASME container calls for the introduction of at least 1 pint of genuine, absolute anhydrous methanol, 99.85% pure, for each 100 gallon of water capacity of the container. On this basis, the minimum volumes for typical cylinders would be as shown below. A 100-pound ICC cylinder would need 1/8 of a pint. A 1,000-gallon tank would need 10 pints accordingly. It's very important to avoid substitutes. They will not work. The secret of the effectiveness of methanol over all other alcohols is its high affinity for water, plus a boiling point lower than all other alcohols. And most important, a boiling point lower than water. The methanol keeps the moisture in a vapor state and allows it to travel downstream to the burner tip. Cody?
Thank you, Paul. So guys, what's wrong with this installation? So they had the right practice. They went ahead and vented this regulator right up to the top of the container. But what's wrong with it? They actually put the vent screen right on top too as well. What is wrong with it? That's going to be the used CPVC piping. So we said again, plastic piping. You're going to have to want to use either electrical conduit, that flexible material, or metallic piping. So if in Canada, use metallic piping. But that's going to be what's wrong with this installation. Then additionally too, so excessive pipe sealant. So we do encourage everybody that if you're going ahead and out there and using your regulators, make sure you're using POL inlets. We do still give you the options of 1/4 inch inlets, but when you're using POL inlets, it gives you the option to get away from having issues with pipe sealant. So it takes away one variable. So as you can see here, this is an LV3403TR regulator, and somebody did use some excess pipe sealant on this fitting. So you can see this pigtail, it almost looked like they went ahead and dumped this pigtail right into that can it piped up and probably wiped it off clean real quick and put it into service. So go ahead, make sure when you're going ahead and putting these regulators and you're using these regulators, do not use excessive pipe sealant. Try to put that pipe sealant after the first thread. Don't put it on the first thread. And then additionally, use POL fittings. So do your best to use POL fittings. But you can see as this regulator is installed and over time, that pipe sealant eventually traveled down and got into that seat disc. So getting onto that seat disc won't allow that regulator to lock up and close, and eventually it's going to go ahead and vent gas. Then pre-bent hogtails. So just kind of as an installation tip, I wish I knew about these when I was out in the field. Those of you guys that are experiencing cold temperatures, especially when you're out there in the wintertime and you're complaining about your arthritis with your fingers and they're cramping up, you guys can actually get a pre-bent hogtail. We do sell pre-bent hogtails. It just gives you the ability to have them bent already. You can contour them and move them around a little bit, but they're going to be bent for the positions that you guys need them. So we have either a right hand or a left hand orientation. So make sure if you guys need them, you can get them from us.
Great. Well, let's wrap up the regulator installation tips. RegO's general recommendations are: install properly, inspect regularly, replace as necessary. The recommended service life of our RegO LP gas regulator manufactured after 1995, except single stage, is 25 years. Cody?
Thank you, Paul. And also, too, don't forget, especially right now during this time we have with the COVID-19, remember, RegO is made in the United States. We have strict policies for quality control. So every regulator, every valve, every component of a regulator is thoroughly tested before it goes out the door. So we are made in the United States. We are manufactured, we are assembled, and we are tested all in the United States. And like I said before, if anybody is in North Carolina, please let me know. Please contact me. We can absolutely give you a plant tour and show you some of our machinery, show you what we have and what we do to put together our regulators, and show you some of our practices that we do. Then we did mention some material in here. So our L500 catalog is our big main catalog. It has a lot of installation tips in there, troubleshooting tips, and it has almost all of our product line in there. For a condensed version of our product line, this is going to be our L102 catalogs. Then for a smaller version is going to be our RegO regulator catalogs. So all these catalogs are available online. Same thing with your serviceman's manuals. Make sure you download that RegO app, and that will have your L545 serviceman's manual, and then allow you to do some pipe sizing in there as well. Then if you do wanted hard copies, contact your distributors. Your distributors will be able to get them out to you guys.
Will join us for our second part of our three-part training series. Also, don't forget, like Cody said, throw in your name, company name, email, and address for a chance to win some of that neat RegO swag. Appreciate it, everybody. Thank you for joining us.